Good evening, this is All Sports with LD coming back at you with another YouTube post from my YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. I'll fight everybody. Canelo Alvarez plots out his path to history. Now, I find this statement to be very interesting because the fact is he doesn't fight everybody. Boxing fans already know he turned down the fight to an offer from Earl Spence, but he fights everybody, right? Ever since his loss to Floyd Mayweather, he's made sure, or his team, whether it's Canelo or his team, has made sure that he's taken less difficult fights, fights that they're pretty confident that he'll win. So let's take a look at his opponents since the loss to Floyd Mayweather Jr. Into Floyd Mayweather Jr., these were his opponents after that fight: Alfredo Angulo, Erislandy Lara, James Kirkland, Miguel Cotto, Emir Khan, Liam Smith, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., Gennady Golovkin, Rocky Fielding, Daniel Jacobs, Sergey Kovalov, Caleb Smith, Ani Yildirim, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, and his upcoming opponent, Dimitri Bivol. Now, the list of those names, with the exception, I would say, Gennady Golovkin, they weren't real contenders. Probably most of them on the backside of their career, not a real threat to Canelo. So those were easy victories. And a few of them, I believe, were at catchweights. Let's scroll down here a little bit. Sorry, I passed it up. But anyway, so as you can see, the list of the fighters that he fought after the loss to Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, what's interesting about these opponents, there are some opponents that are missing from this ledger. From the junior middleweight, middleweight, and light heavyweight. Excuse me, let me correct that. Junior middleweight, super middleweight, and light heavyweight. There are certain names missing from this ledger. And let me go ahead and point those out. The fighter who is missing from Canelo Alvarez's ledger, and again, remember, he said he fights everybody. Jermell Charlo. He's a junior middleweight. When Canelo was a junior middleweight or fought for the junior middleweight title, there was no mention of Jermell Charlo as a possible opponent. The next one that's not on the ledger, let's move on to the middleweight division. We are in the middleweight division, and a couple of fighters that are missing from Canelo's ledger is Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. Again, when Canelo went to middleweight to fight Gennady Golovkin, he intentionally bypassed Jermall and Demetrius. Now, even though he fought Gennady Golovkin, 2 fights. Now, depending upon who you talk to, there's a bit of controversy in the 2 fights against Gennady Golovkin. Many people think he lost the 2 fights. Some people think he won. Nevertheless, that's the only guy that's on his ledger from the middleweight division. And I suspect the only reason why he fought Gennady Golovkin, and the only reason why there's going to be a 3rd fight with Gennady Golovkin, is he believes that he can beat Gennady Golovkin. Not so with Jermell Charlo or Demetrius Andrade. Otherwise, he already would have fought these 2 guys. So let's move on to super middleweight. So in the super middleweight division, a guy that's missing from his ledger is David Benavidez. The reason why David Benavidez is missing from Canelo Alvarez's ledger is because Canelo doesn't believe he can beat David Benavidez. And the truth of the matter is he cannot. So, what did, in like Canelo fashion, what did he do? He fought in the superweight division where he became undisputed super middleweight. He fights Caleb Plant, not David Benavidez. He fights Caleb Plant, the weaker of the 2 fighters. But again, you see the article says he'll fight everybody. No, he doesn't. That's not true. Not true at all. So let's move on to the light heavyweight division. So in the light heavyweight division, the guy that's number 1 in the divisions is Artur Beterbiev. And yet, Canelo selected the number 2 light heavyweight in the division. So this only proves without a shadow of a doubt that Canelo doesn't fight everyone. Well, let me rephrase that. He'll fight everybody that he knows he can beat. He will not fight fighters that he doesn't believe he can beat, and or at least would be competitive enough that you can say there's a toss-up that he may lose this fight. So the reality is he'll fight those fighters that he believes that he can beat. And this is the reason why he's fighting Bivol, because he believes he can beat Bivol. Now, no disrespect to Bivol, based on what I saw his last fight against Salamov. To me, the guy was like a C-level fighter, and Bivol allowed him to last 12 rounds with him. Although he won a unanimous decision, but I wasn't impressed with his performance. Yeah, sure, he looked slick, as a slick boxer, but if you are the number 2 guy in the division and you're fighting a C-level fighter, there's no reason why that C-level fighter should be able to go 12 rounds with you. You should have put him out, put an end to this early on. But hey, that's just my opinion. But the bottom line is, Canelo fights everybody that he believes he can beat. He won't ever fight guys that he has a second thought about that he may not win this fight. I doubt very seriously if we'll ever see him fight the Charlo brothers. I doubt very seriously if we'll ever see him fight David Benavidez. I doubt very seriously if we'll ever see him fight Demetrius Andrade. I doubt very seriously if we'll see him in these fights that what I believe and most real boxing fans believe are fights that he may not win. So, just a little something to think about on the eve of his fight with Bivol. As I previewed the fight before, I think Canelo wins this fight. Like I said, Bivol doesn't show me much in terms of a fighter that I would say, he has a chance to beat Canelo. So that's just my take on it. So for now, that's what I have. Have a good one.